Did you know Elvis Presley once refused to perform unless his black backup singers, the sweet inspirations, could stay in the same whites-only hotel as him in segregated Texas? Or that he defied Memphis's rigid segregation rules by attending colored nights at the local fairgrounds? And maybe you haven't heard that during a time when crossing racial lines was dangerous, Elvis openly credited black musicians like Arthur Big Boy Crudup as his inspiration, ensuring their names reached his massive white audience. He even caused a stir at a strictly segregated charity event by leaving the white performers section to sit with black artists he admired. These weren't grand political statements, but quiet actions echoing through a divided America. Number 5. He didn't just sing the blues. He lived near it and learned from it. Elvis Aaron Presley grew up poor, really poor, first in a tiny shotgun shack in Tupelo, Mississippi, and later in public housing in Memphis, Tennessee. This wasn't the sin-hide image often presented later. This poverty placed him in neighborhoods where black and white families lived in close proximity, not by choice, but by economic necessity. Segregation was the law and the harsh reality of the South, dictating separate schools, separate water fountains, separate everything. Yet, in these liminal spaces, cultural boundaries were more porous than the rigid laws intended. Young Elvis heard music drifting from porches, radios, and churches, black gospel music pulsating with raw emotion and rhythm, the mournful storytelling of the blues. His family attended the Assembly of God Church, known for its expressive musically infused services that shared roots with black Pentecostal traditions. He wasn't just passively hearing this music, it was soaking into him. Memphis, especially, was a crucible of musical innovation. Beale Street, the legendary hub of black music and culture, wasn't geographically far from where the Presleys lived in the Lauderdale Courts housing project. While strict segregation often kept the races apart, the sounds couldn't be entirely contained. Elvis, known even then for his intense curiosity about music, reportedly ventured close enough to Beale Street, or listened intently to radio stations like WDIA, the first station in the country programmed entirely by and for African Americans, to absorb the sounds that weren't being played on mainstream white radio. He heard B.B. King, Howlin' Wolf, Ike Turner, and countless others crafting the bedrock of blues and R&B. He also soaked up country music from the Grand Ole Opry radio broadcasts and the sounds of white gospel quartets. But the crucial element was the blend. He didn't just retell one genre. He started intuitively mashing them together. When he first walked into Sun Records in 1953, famously saying he wanted to make a record for his mother, he sang ballads. Studio owner Sam Phillips, who had been recording blues artists like Howlin' Wolf and B.B. King, reportedly said, "If I could find a white man who had the Negro sound and the Negro feel, I could make $1 billion." During a break in a frustrating recording session in July 1954, Elvis started fooling around, playing a sped-up high-energy version of Arthur Big Boy Crudup's blues song, "That's All Right." Bassist Bill Black and guitarist Scotty Moore joined in. Sam Phillips heard it from the control room and knew instantly that was the sound. It wasn't strictly country, wasn't strictly blues, wasn't strictly R&B. It was something new, a fusion born from Elvis's exposure to these segregated musical worlds. "That's All Right," backed with a bluegrass tune, "Blue Moon of Kentucky," also reimagined with a driving rhythm, became his first single. When Memphis DJ Dewey Phillips, no relation to Sam, first played "That's All Right" on his popular Red Hot and Blue show, the station was flooded with calls. Listeners were captivated, but many were also confused. Was the singer black or white? The sound defied easy categorization, existing in a space that musically ignored the rigid racial lines of the era. Elvis didn't sit down and strategize about breaking down musical segregation. He sang what he felt, and what he felt was a product of the complex, intertwined, yet legally separated cultural environment he grew up in. His music became a space where sounds from white country and gospel met sounds from black blues and R&B, creating rock and roll. This fusion, broadcast across the nation, introduced sounds heavily influenced by black artists to a massive white audience, many of whom had never been exposed to it before, subtly challenging the era's sonic segregation. He wasn't making speeches. The music itself was the statement, a testament to the sounds he absorbed growing up on the edges of segregated society. Number 4. He gave credit where credit was due, loudly and clearly. In an era where black artists often saw their songs covered by white performers who received far greater airplay and financial reward, often without acknowledgement, Elvis frequently made a point of citing his influences. He didn't have to. He was the biggest star in the world, and many performers at the time simply took songs and styles without looking back. But Elvis, especially in interviews and sometimes even from the stage, would talk about the artists who shaped his sound. When discussing his music, he would mention names that were unfamiliar to many in his mainstream white audience. He spoke about Arthur Big Boy Crudup, the bluesman whose "That's All Right" launched his career at Sun Records. He didn't just cover the song. He talked about Crudup's influence. This was significant because Crudup, like many black artists of his time, received little financial compensation or widespread recognition for his foundational work. By mentioning his name, Elvis directed a spotlight, however briefly, onto the source. He famously admired Fats Domino, another architect of rock and roll whose piano-driven R&B hits crossed over to the pop charts. Elvis respected him immensely, sometimes referring to him as the real king of rock and roll. He recognized the shared roots and Domino's pioneering role. He also expressed admiration for performers like Chuck Berry, Little Richard, and Bo Diddley, whose energy and showmanship clearly resonated with his own performance style. He covered their songs, like Little Richard's Tutti Frutti and Rip It Up and Chuck Berry's Memphis, Tennessee, introducing these explosive tracks to audiences who might not have heard the originals on segregated radio stations. Beyond blues and R&B, he often spoke about the impact of gospel music, both black and white. He loved gospel quartets and frequently mentioned artists like Jake Hess and the Statesman Quartet or Sister Rosetta Tharpe, a pioneering black guitarist and singer whose energetic performances blurred the lines between secular and sacred music long before Elvis did. He recorded numerous gospel albums throughout his career, winning his only competitive Grammy Awards for these recordings, quoting his genuine and lifelong passion for the genre. In a famous 1957 interview for the Canadian Broadcasting Corporation, when asked about his sound, Elvis specifically mentioned his debt to black artists and gospel music, acknowledging their foundational role in what he was doing. At a time when the establishment often tried to downplay or outright ignore the black roots of rock and roll, Elvis's public acknowledgments were noteworthy. He wasn't positioning himself as a sole inventor, but as someone who was deeply influenced by and appreciative of the black musicians who came before him and were his contemporaries. While issues of cultural appropriation and fair compensation remained complex and systemic problems, far larger than one performer, Elvis's repeated public crediting of his black influences acted as a form of validation. It forced, to some degree, a recognition of black artistry within the mainstream narrative of popular music, subtly pushing back against the racial biases that sought to erase those contributions. His words carried immense weight due to his unparalleled fame, ensuring that names like Crudup, Domino, and Tharp reached millions who might otherwise never have heard of them or understood their connection to the music they loved. Number 3. He casually ignored segregation lines in his personal life. While Elvis Presley never became a vocal activist in the civil rights movement, numerous accounts and anecdotes from his life illustrate a personal disregard for the rigid segregation norms of the Jim Crow South, especially in his interactions with black individuals. These weren't grand public protests, but smaller, everyday actions that deviated from the expected behavior for a white superstar in that era. Growing up in integrated, albeit poor neighborhoods in Tupelo and Memphis fostered a level of comfort and familiarity across racial lines that wasn't universal among white Southerners at the time. This seemed to carry over into his adult life. One often cited example involves his interactions on Beale Street in Memphis. Even as his fame grew, he was known to occasionally visit places like Lansky Bros, Clothier's, a store popular with black musicians and known for its flashy styles, which Elvis favored. The Lanskys catered to both black and white clientele, creating a somewhat integrated space centered around fashion and music. Elvis felt comfortable there, interacting with Bernard Lansky and browsing alongside black artists. More significantly, there are accounts of Elvis attending events or places designated for black people simply because he wanted to be there or see someone perform. In the early days, before his fame became overwhelming, he reportedly attended black churches occasionally, drawn by the powerful gospel music he loved. A particularly telling story involves the Mid-South Fair and Livestock Show in Memphis. During the era of strict segregation, the fair designated specific nights often called colored nights or similar terms, when black citizens were allowed admission. According to several accounts, including from those who knew him then, Elvis, already a rising star, sometimes attended the fair on these designated nights. He wasn't there to make a statement. He was reportedly there to enjoy the rides, the atmosphere, and possibly the music, just like everyone else. However, his mere presence as a white person, let alone a famous one in a space officially segregated for black people, was a quiet but definite breach of the prevailing social code. His interactions with black musicians he admired often went beyond just citing influence. He sought them out, expressed respect, and treated them as peers. B.B. King, the blues legend, spoke about his encounters with Elvis in Memphis. King noted that Elvis would come to watch him perform on Beale Street, and that Elvis treated him with respect. While King also pointed out the economic disparities and the fact that Elvis achieved a level of fame inaccessible to black artists playing similar music at the time, he generally portrayed Elvis's personal attitude towards him as positive and respectful. Another significant aspect was his relationship with his backing vocal groups later in his career, particularly the Sweet Inspirations, an all-black female gospel and soul group. During tours, especially in the segregated South, finding accommodations could be challenging. There are documented instances, like one in Texas, where the hotel management initially refused to let the Sweet Inspirations stay in the same whites-only hotel as Elvis and the rest of the entourage. Elvis reportedly intervened directly, stating flatly that if the group couldn't stay, he wouldn't perform. Faced with losing the star attraction, the hotel management relented. This wasn't a press conference moment. It was a behind-the-scenes insistence on basic dignity and respect for the black members of his own team, using his considerable leverage to override a segregationist policy in a specific instance. Similarly, his friendship with Muhammad Ali, a controversial figure himself due to his conversion to Islam and refusal to be drafted during the Vietnam War, crossed racial and political lines. Elvis presented Ali with a custom-made robe emblazoned People's Champion. Their interactions showed mutual respect between two towering figures from vastly different backgrounds who might have been expected by societal norms to keep their distance. These personal actions attending events across color lines showing direct respect to black artists, insisting on equal treatment for his black colleagues, didn't dismantle the system of segregation. However, they demonstrated a personal ethic that seemed unconcerned with the artificial racial boundaries imposed by Jim Crow. In his own sphere, Elvis often acted as if those lines didn't or shouldn't exist. Number 2. His Aloha from Hawaii show was a global spectacle of unity and diversity. On January 14, 1973, Elvis Presley performed a concert at the Honolulu International Center, Arena, now the Neil S. Blaisdell Center. This wasn't just any concert. It was Aloha from Hawaii via satellite, the first entertainment special by a solo artist to be broadcast live around the world via satellite. While primarily conceived as a ground-daring technological feat and a spectacular showcase for Elvis, the event also subtly projected images of diversity and unity at a time when racial and global tensions were still high. The concert itself was a benefit for the Kuili Cancer Fund, named after a popular Hawaiian yokahu who had died of cancer. This charitable aspect set a tone of goodwill from the outset. But the visual and musical presentation carried its own message. Elvis's band and orchestra for the show were notably diverse. His core TCB, taking care of business, band included talented musicians like James Burton, guitar, Jerry Sheff, bass, Ronnie Tutt, drums, and Glenn D. Hardin, piano. But alongside them were the Sweet Inspirations, his regular black female backup vocal group, featuring Cissy Houston, Whitney Houston's mother, Myrna Smith, Estelle Brown, and Sylvia Shemwell. Also prominently featured was J.D. Sumner and the Stamps Quartet, a white Southern gospel group. The orchestra, conducted by Joe Guercio, included musicians from various backgrounds. This lineup visually presented a harmonious collaboration between black and white artists, male and female, sharing the stage and creating music together. In the context of early 1970s, America, which was still grappling with the aftermath of the civil rights movement and ongoing racial tensions, this integrated ensemble, performing on a global stage. The choice of Hawaii as the location was also symbolic. Hawaii, with its Mayan population and history, represented a melting pot unique within the United States. The show opened with theme music that incorporated Hawaiian elements, and Elvis famously adorned himself with numerous flower lace presented by fans upon his arrival and during the show. He performed songs that spanned his career, drawing from rock and roll, pop country, gospel, and blues, the very blend that had always characterized his music. Songs like An American Trion, a medley arranged by Mickey Newberry, took on a particular resonance in this context. The trilogy combined Dixie, a song associated with the Confederacy, the Battle Hymn of the Republic, a Union anthem, and All My Trials, a Bahamian lullaby turned folk spiritual often associated with the struggles for peace and freedom. Performing this complex piece, which juxtaposed symbols of America's divided past with a call for unity and spiritual reflection in front of a global audience, added layers of meaning. While Elvis likely chose it for its dramatic and musical power, the performance of Trion in this diverse setting implicitly spoke to themes of reconciliation and shared American identity. The satellite broadcast itself was a statement. It reached an estimated audience of over 1 billion people across more than 40 countries in Asia and Europe, though it was shown on tape delay in the US. This unprecedented global reach turned the concert into a shared international experience. Presenting Elvis, an American icon, alongside a visibly diverse group of musicians, performing music rooted in both black and white traditions, projected an image of American culture that was more inclusive than often depicted. The concert didn't contain overt political messages or calls for social change. Elvis performed his songs, bantered with the audience, and delivered the thematic performance he was known for. Yet the very act of staging such a massive, technologically advanced show, featuring an integrated cast broadcast globally from the diverse setting of Hawaii, subtly communicated a message of unity and cross-cultural collaboration. It showcased American popular music, with its complex racial roots, as a force capable of bringing people together, both on stage and across the globe, using the cutting edge of technology to bridge distances and implicitly divides. Number 1. He walked away from the white section to sit with black artists he admired. Perhaps one of the most striking examples of Elvis Presley quietly defying segregation happened early in his career, at a time when doing so was particularly risky in the Deep South. And the event was the WDI A Goodwill Review, an annual charity show held in Memphis, organized by the pioneering black radio station WDIA. This station was hugely influential, not just for its programming, but also for its community involvement, and the Goodwill Review raised funds for underprivileged black children. In December 1956, Elvis, by then a national phenomenon, was invited to perform. This itself was significant. WDIA catered primarily to a black audience, and while Elvis's music was popular across racial lines, an appearance by the biggest white star in the country at their specific charity event was noteworthy. The venue, Ellis Auditorium, like most public spaces in Memphis at the time, was strictly segregated. There were designated seating areas for white attendees and black attendees. Even the performers were typically expected to remain within their racially designated sections, backstage, or when off stage. According to accounts from people who were there, including Rufus Thomas, a legendary Memphis musician and WDIA DJ, Elvis arrived and initially performed his set for the enthusiastic, predominantly black audience. His music, deeply influenced by the blues and R&B, played on stations like WDIA, was well received. The crucial moment, however, happened after his performance. Instead of retreating to the area designated for white performers or guests, Elvis did something unexpected. He spotted several black performers. He admired sitting in the audience, or in the section reserved for black artists. Among them were established figures like B.B. King and Ray Charles, artists whose music Elvis deeply respected. Rather than maintaining the expected segregationist distance, Elvis walked over to where they were. He went into the black section of the auditorium and sat down with them. He reportedly greeted them warmly, shook hands, and engaged in conversation, showing genuine admiration and camaraderie. Rufus Thomas later described the scene, emphasizing the stir it caused. In the rigidly segregated environment of 1950s Memphis, a white person, especially one as famous as Elvis, deliberately crossing the physical color line to sit and socialize with black people, was a clear violation of the established racial etiquette and segregation laws. It wasn't a political protest in the conventional sense. Elvis didn't make a speech about integration. It seemed to be a spontaneous act driven by his respect for the musicians and his apparent disregard for the artificial barriers of segregation. He wanted to be near the artists he looked up to, and he simply went and sat with them, ignoring the invisible but potent line dividing the room. The significance of this action lies in its context. This was Memphis in 1956, the heart of the segregated South, less than 2 years after the Brown v. Board of Education ruling had intensified racial tensions. Social customs were strictly enforced, often through intimidation or violence. For Elvis, the biggest star in the world, to casually disregard these rules in such a public setting sent a subtle but powerful message. It demonstrated a lack of personal prejudice and a willingness to interact with black artists as equals, based on mutual respect for their talent. It was a quiet act, unheralded by press releases, but witnessed by those present, particularly the black audience and artists at the WDIA event. It suggested that for Elvis, the music and the shared humanity transcended the racial divisions mandated by society. This incident, along with others like it, contributes to the picture of Elvis navigating the racial complexities of his time, not through activism, but through personal interactions that often ignored the color lines everyone else was forced to observe.